our presenter. Florian Drittenthaler is a product line manager at Congatec and has a wealth of experience in the areas of quality and technology management. Previously, he worked in strategic technology management. He holds a bachelor's degree in industrial engineering and a master's degree in technology management. He is currently expanding his expertise with a master's degree in business informatics. Following the presentation, we'll have a live Q&A with Florian. You can submit your questions at any time during the session using the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. Thank you so much for joining. With that, I'll hand it off to Florian for his presentation.
Hello and welcome to today's session about lifting the fog, an introduction to EU cybersecurity regulations. My name is Florian Drittenthaler. I work as a product line manager at Congatec. And normally I used to say technology is future, persistence is, well, let's just say less logical. But for today's session, I think it's better suited to say cybersecurity regulations are the future and resistance is futile. They will come and we can't change this fact. So we need to know about these regulations and we need to know how to tackle them. So for today's agenda, we're going to talk about some cybersecurity basics. We're going to have a look at the overview of regulations within the European Union. And then we're going to have a more detailed look on the Cyber Resilience Act. We're going to talk about the NIS2 directive. Afterwards, we're going to take a look at the IEC 62443. And then we're going to have a brief summary. And after that, we're going to have a Q&A session. Okay, let's get started with some cybersecurity basics. So first of all, cybersecurity is not functional safety. So cybersecurity concentrates on technologies, processes, and controls to protect a system, network, programs, devices, and data from cyber attacks. And in contrast to that, functional safety is the safeguard against hazards resulting from faulty and interrupted functionality, which means functional safety basically has to safeguard the user from the machine, and the cybersecurity has to safeguard the machine from the user. The CIA Triad is one of the most basic frameworks in cybersecurity, which describes the three most important goals you always have to keep in mind when talking about cybersecurity. So those are confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So confidentiality is about preserving authorized restrictions on information access and disclosure, including means for protecting personal privacy and proprietary information. So it's all about keeping information confidential. So to make sure only authorized persons or organizations or systems are allowed to get the information. But what about integrity? Integrity is guarding against improper information modification or destruction and ensuring information non-repudiation and authenticity. So it's all about making sure that the information you're going to transmit is transceived in the original way. So it was not tampered with, and to make sure that the information which is received is exactly the information you are sending. So one technical way of it, probably you heard about it, is making hashes, and then you can compare those two hash values to make sure that the information you received is the same, the one who is the same information which was sent. And what about availability? Availability is to ensure timely and reliable access to and use of information. So everything is about that the information is at least available. So the best confident or integrity doesn't bring any benefits if you can't actually access your data. So the availability itself is also crucial. So those are the three main goals you always have to keep in mind when talking about cybersecurity. Before we go more into details into all the different EU regulations, let's have a brief look at some important definitions. So standard, directive, and regulation. So a standard is usually created by industry committees, and compliance is usually voluntary, like ISO standards, IEC standards. And a EU directive is a legislative act that sets out a goal that EU countries must achieve. It is up to the individual countries to devise their own laws. So this means if the EU creates a new directive, all the member states have to translate those directives into their national laws. So for example, the NIS2 or the RED directives, they are on a European level, but it's up to different member states to introduce their own national laws. An opposite, therefore, is the EU regulation. So a EU regulation is a binding legislative act, and it must be applied in its entirety across the complete European Union, which means a regulation does not have to be translated into national law, but it's already in force for all member states as soon as it's decided by the European Union. So, for example, the Cyber Resilience Act, the AI Act, the Data Act, and a lot of other acts, they are EU regulations. So they are in force directly after they were adopted by the European Union. Let's have a look at the cybersecurity regulations within the European Union. As you can already see, there's a bunch of them. But today we're going to focus on the Cyber Resilience Act and the NIS2 directive. But what about other regions? So in the US, there is the US Cyber Trust Mark, which currently is on a voluntary basis. And in the UK, there is the PSTI. So as you can see, it's not only the European Union that cyber security regulations are emerging, but it's also in other regions like the US or the UK. And also China is going to have some cyber security regulations and so on. So you can't avoid them, they are coming, and we need to have a look at them and to figure out how to work with them and how to comply to those different regulations. Let's start with the Cyber Resilience Act. What are the motivations behind the Cyber Resilience Act? So, first of all, there's a low level of cybersecurity and digital products. At least the European Union sees that there is insufficient cybersecurity updates and vulnerability management, and that cyber attacks quickly propagate and affect a lot of organizations and also supply chains, and that widespread vulnerabilities are a big threat and they're rising. And those leads to high societal and economic cost. So the global cybercrime cost reached 5.5 trillion euros by 2021. And we can only imagine that the number is rising and rising. And there is also a high impact from incidents like the WannaCry attack affecting over 150 countries. So we are talking about global threats here. And there is a lack of information for users. So this is more based on the consumer side. So users, they lack information on cybersecurity of the product, and it's difficult for them to choose what product is more secure or which one is better or safe, more safe for them to use. And the EU wants to tackle this by introducing the Cyber Resilience Act. And also they saw the need for harmonized EU regulation, as cybersecurity threats always come with a cross-border nature. So if there is an incident in one member state, it will most likely also affect other member states. And to ensure that there is a consistent cybersecurity standard within the whole internal market, the CRA is going to introduce those bare minimum standard regulations and also the bare minimum cybersecurity levels you have to reach. And so those are already the key goals. So ensure fewer vulnerabilities when a product enters the market, create a uniform cybersecurity framework across the EU, and enhance transparency for users regarding cybersecurity properties of products. When talking about the Cyber Resilience Act, there is one abbreviation we will always come across, and it's the PDE. So what is it? A PDE is a product with digital elements. And when you have a look at the Cyber Resilience Act, you're gonna read this term a lot. And it describes the scope of the Cyber Resilience Act, which means it will be applicable to all products which have digital elements. And let's take a minute and think about it. So what are actually digital elements? So like all modern products which have software or kind of microchips in them, they have digital elements. So this is a huge impact, this little term. Within the Cyber Resilience Act, PDE is defined as software or hardware product that has direct or indirect logical or physical data connections to a device or network. So here it's already a bit more clear. So it's not about all products which have digital elements, but they need to have some kind of communication within some kind of area. So it's about products which will communicate in the one or the other way. So it goes on. The products with digital elements, they can be classified. And so the classification within the Cyber Resilience Act is between the default products, which are basically all products which are products with digital elements, and then there are just critical products. And these critical products, again, can be divided in class 1 or class 2 critical products. And this is all stated within the annex of the Cyber Resilience Act, and there are a lot more of details in there, so which products will fall in which category. And sometimes when you come across a fourth category, which are like even more critical products, this is not yet part of the Cyber Resilience Act, but the Cyber Resilience Act already states that there can be this fourth category, which is for critical products. So there most probably will be this fourth category in the future. But at the current state, it's not there yet. But it's already stated that it can be there, and I'm sure that it will be there, because also in regards to the NIS2 directive, where we talk about critical infrastructures, so there will be a need for this fourth category of the critical products. But let's have a look at those three categories which are in the Cyber Resilience Act right now at this point. So the default product, you don't need any assessment by a third party, so a self-assessment will be sufficient. And there's no special criteria for it. So you need to do a risk assessment, and then you need to do an assessment that your product will be compliant to the Cyber Resilience Act. So products like this can be photo editing software, word processing, games, smart speakers, and stuff like this. And if you look at the critical products, like for example class 1, you already need to apply some kind of standard or do a third-party assessment. And for the class 2 critical products, a third-party assessment is mandatory. So you need to do a third-party assessment to be sure that you're compliant to the Cyber Resilience Act, and that they also confirm this. And there will be those different criteria, for example, the functionality, the intended use of it, and also other criteria, for example, the extent of impact if something happens or if there is any incident. And so what kind of products are there? So for class 1 product within the Cyber Resilience Act, it's already mentioned, it can be a password manager, network interfaces, firewalls, microcontrollers, and so on. And the class 2 products will be operating systems, industrial firewalls, CPUs, and all kind of secure elements. So as you can see, it's all more about those critical infrastructures already within the critical products here. After talking about the PDEs, let's have a look at who is actually affected by the Cyber Resilience Act. So it's three main parties here. So it's the manufacturers, the distributors, and the importers. So the manufacturers, they must design, develop, and produce the products in accordance to the essential cyber security requirements. The distributors, they are required to verify that the products they supply in the market comply with the Cyber Resilience Act. And the importers must ensure that the products they place on the EU market comply with the essential cyber security requirements. So this basically means that as a manufacturer, it's not only about having a secure product, but you're already within the design phase, the development phase, the production phase, and over the whole life cycle, you always have to keep in mind the security aspect of your product. And as a distributor, so even if the product, so if you want to distribute any product from a different region, but you want to distribute it on the European Union, you need to comply to the Cyber Resilience Act. So be aware that it's not only about products within the European Union, but everyone who wants to get any of his product onto the European market needs to comply with the Cyber Resilience Act. It's the same for importers located in the EU. If they want to import any products, they need to ensure that the products they are importing comply to the essential cybersecurity requirements laid down by the Cyber Resilience Act. For today, let's focus more on the obligations for manufacturers, as probably the most of you are engineers and they're interested in their obligations as a developer, as a manufacturer of a product. So you need to do a risk assessment. You always need to keep in mind security by design. You need to do a conformity assessment. You need to provide security updates, and there needs to be a reporting process in place. So right at the beginning, you need to assess the cybersecurity risks associated with your product. Then you need to include this risk assessment into the technical documentation, and always keep in mind the risks you identified during this risk assessment right at the beginning during all the different phases of the product development. And always use the principle of security by design, and really important, by default. So if you ship the product, it should come in a by default security state. So if there are any kind of features which needs to be enabled to have a secure product, they need to be enabled by default. So security always has to be on your mind during planning, design, development, production, delivery, maintenance. So it's really important always to have in mind the different risks you assessed during the first phase. And before placing the product onto the market, you need to do the self-assessment or a third-party assessment. And this depends on the category your product falls into. So is it a default product, or is it a critical product, class 1, class 2, or the upcoming fourth category, which will be the critical products. And security updates, it's a huge topic. So you need to provide security updates over the whole life cycle. And you need to provide a mechanism to install the security updates, which can be quite tricky within deep integrated platforms within the field. So this is it's really a topic here. So, and also providing security updates over the whole life cycle means you need to make sure that all the different software components which are part of your product will have security updates over the whole life cycle. So if you have a product which will be there for about 10 years, which is an absolutely normal time frame within the embedded market, for example, you need to make sure that you can provide these updates over the whole 10 years. and you need to provide a mechanism to really install the update there. And always make sure that there is a reasonable way how to do it, because it's really difficult to always send one of your technicians there to install any kind of update. So this already brings us into the topic of remote updates or also manageability. So this already implies a lot of different things which come along with this requirement of the security updates. And also for the reporting, there must be a reporting process to ENISA. So ENISA is the European Information and Security Agency, and you need to, so if you become aware of any exploited vulnerability within one of your products, you need to report this within 24 hours to ENISA. And then some other timelines also are starting. So after 48 hours, you need to send them a report, and then I think after 2 weeks or something like that, you also need to send them a really detailed report about it. So it's really strict, and make yourself aware of this and already make sure that you have processes in place how you can comply to this. Because if you fail to do so, there will also be penalties in the future, and they are in the range of the GDPR. So there will be really high penalties. So make sure that you have your processes in place to report vulnerabilities, or to be more specific, vulnerabilities they have actively been exploited. When already talking about the timeline for reporting, let's have a look at the timeline of the CRA itself. So the Cyber Resilience Act will enter into force this year in late September or beginning of October, and then 24 months after entry into force, the obligations for reporting starts. So you have 24 months to implement your processes to adhere to all the reporting obligations you have. And after 36 months, the Cyber Resilience Act will be completely enforceable. So this may sound like a lot of time. 36 months from now, it's 3 years, so I have enough time to comply to the Cyber Resilience Act. So yeah, let's start later. But keep in mind that projects you start now probably will transfer into MP phase, mass production phase, in the range of 2026, 2027. So they will be put on the market when the Cyber Resilience Act is already completely enforceable. So it's important that you start now thinking of the Cyber Resilience Act, that you start now assessing the risk, that you start now to get to know what exactly you need to do. So the first step is already good, you're here. So you're already informing yourselves about the Cyber Resilience Act. So you already did the first step, which is really good. But the next step should be making sure that you have the reporting processes in place, because this will be the first thing you need to do in the future. And also, you can already start by assessing your risks. And for assessing your risks, you need also to assess what are actually the use cases of your products, what are the intended uses. So start now by setting up the documentation for it, by going into discussion, maybe also with your customers about how they are going to use your product, how you are intending your product, align the different expectations here. So you should already start with it. So let's briefly summarize the Cyber Resilience Act. So the Cyber Resilience Act will be affecting the whole internal market of the EU. It's all about products with digital elements, and it's here to increase the security of PDEs throughout their whole life cycle. And it's a new regulation that introduces mandatory cybersecurity requirements for hardware and software products with digital elements. You have 24 hours time to report incidents if you after becoming aware that there is a vulnerability which is actively exploited. The Cyber Resilience Act will be mandatory to get a CE marking, so you will only have compliance with the CE marking if you're complying with the CRA. So this is also a huge topic, as you need the CE marking to place your product onto the market. And how is the Cyber Resilience Act going to reach its goals? So it's promoting security over lifetime, so design, development, production, and critical software updates over the whole lifetime. So again, updates is a really important thing here. And what does it not have in scope? So websites or pure software as a service, or also free open source softwares, or already regulated sectors and special PDEs, which are also not part of the Cyber Resilience Act. But be aware that those will have their own regulations, and probably their own regulations will be even more strict than the Cyber Resilience Act is. And let me add a word to the free open source software. So if you're using the open source software for any kind of proprietary applications, or if you're using them for any other applications you're going to charge for, then there needs to be a steward for the open source software who is also taking care of it. So because also the Cyber Resilience Act then will apply in part to the open source software. So again here, double check this and make sure that everything is compliant. So what about the penalties? I already mentioned. So they can be up to 50 million euros or up to 2.5% of the worldwide annual turnover, whichever is higher. So it can be really expensive. So it's in the range of the GDPR. And the timeline, again, so the adoption and entry into force will be this year, September, October. And so after entry into force, 24 months after that, the reporting obligation will start, and 36 months after entry into force, it will be completely enforceable. So start taking it into account right now for projects, as it will be an important part of the whole lifetime of your product. NIS2 Directive, Network and Information Security Directive. Let's jump over and talk about it. So what is the motivation behind the NIS2 Directive? So it's about strengthening cybersecurity resilience across all EU member states, addressing increasing cyber security threats to critical infrastructure sectors. So critical infrastructure is important here. Establishing unified cybersecurity standards and obligations for essential and important entities. Enhance cross-border collaboration and incident response. And improve supply chain security and business continuity measures. So within this different motivations, you can already sense a difference to the Cyber Resilience Act. The NIS2 Directive is focusing on entities, and the Cyber Resilience Act is focusing on the products. So who is going to be affected by the NIS2 Directive? As you can already imagine, NIS2, there already has been an NIS directive. So the NIS directive from 2016, it covered 7 essential entities, so seven essential sectors, which you can see here on the left in gray. But the NIS2 directive now added 4 additional sectors, and the NIS2 directive also added the important entities now, which brings an additional 7 sectors into account here. So it's a huge impact this will make, because a lot more entities are now affected by the NIS or in this case, the NIS2 directive. Now, who is going to be affected? So within the essential entities, only large enterprises will be affected. So if you have over 250 employees and have over 50 million turnover a year. And again, there will be some special cases which will be affected regardless their size or turnover. And within the important entities, large and medium-sized enterprises will be affected. And for small and micro enterprises, they will be excluded. So if you have less than 50 employees and turnover less than 10 million a year, you will be excluded. But be aware that some entities are regulated regardless of their size. So again, you need to check carefully if you're going to be affected or not. Are you confused now? Well, that's basically what I was after reading all these different regulations and knowing that there is those important entities and essential entities, and then there's 3 different sizes. So will I be affected? Am I not affected? Well, thankfully, here in Germany, the Bundesamt für Sicherheit in Informationstechnik, the BSI, they have their own tool where you can check if you're affected or not. So it's a bunch of different questions you have to answer, and then they will tell you if you're affected or not. So this is a great tool. But as the NIS2 directive is a directive which has to be put into national law within all the different EU member states, it can differ in some details. So you really need to make sure to apply, to conform to the law within your country. So here in Germany, it will be the NIS2 Umsetzungsgesetz, but in different countries, it probably will be a different act, and you need to comply with the local law there. So the NIS2 directive states key cybersecurity measures. So why are 2 of them very interesting for us? So it's the supply chain and it's purchasing. So within the supply chain, it states that security in the supply chain through to secure development at suppliers is important. And within purchasing, it states that security in the procurement of IT and network systems is important. So this now affects all of us. Even if we are only a manufacturer or only if we are developing any products, the NIS2 directive is probably not directly affecting us, but it's affecting us through our customers, which means that our customers, which are probably some entities which fall into those categories, they need to make sure that they have a security in the supply chain, which now requires from us to provide to them those products in a secure state. And we also need to have documentation available, which is important for our customers to make sure that their supply chain is actually doing a safe and secure development, and that all the processes are in place, that all the requirements are met. So the NIS2 directive actually is also affecting a lot more people, but due to the fact that there also will be a Cyber Resilience Act, which is covering most of those regulations already, it will affect us even through the Cyber Resilience Act. So nothing real changing here except for the timeline, because the NIS2 directive will be in force before the Cyber Resilience Act will enter into force. When already talking about the timeline, so what's the actual timeline? So the NIS2 was adopted and entered into force between 2022 and 2023, so December, January. And there's a deadline that it has to be put into national laws by the 17th of October 2024, so which will be quite soon. But for example, in Germany, it's doubtful that the legislation will be enforced to this deadline. So currently it looks like it will enter into force in March 2025. So you need to check this individually for all the different member states. So the nature of a directive is that it needs to be enforced by all the different member states by their own national law. So there can also be differences in the details. So for example, those different categories like the essential and important entities within the NIS2 directive, they're actually called a bit differently, but I use the terms here from the German interpretation of the law and from the German NIS2 Umsetzungsgesetz, because this is what we will have here in Germany then. And yeah, so there will be small details differently with every member state. So make sure that you have a look at the national laws within the country you're located. Let's have a brief summary of the NIS2 directive. So it will be applicable in the whole European Union through national laws within the different member states, and they have to transfer it until the 17th of October. As we already heard, maybe not all countries will adhere to this deadline, but let's keep in mind the 17th of October is the deadline from the European Union. Within Germany, there is a handy checker tool available where you can check if you're affected by the NIS2 directive. And a really interesting number I came across is 30,000. So it's estimated that around 30,000 entities among Germany will be affected by the NIS2 directive. As a comparison, about 2,000 entities were affected by the NIS directive. So the scope was really broadened here, and a bunch more of companies now fall into the scope of it. And there's also a different number I came across. So it differs between 100,000 and 150,000 entities over the whole European Union, which will be affected by the NIS2 directive. So it's quite impactful directive. There will be those 11 essential sectors and 7 important sectors. Out of scope are small and micro enterprises, but again, there will be some entities which will be covered by the NIS2 directive regardless of their size. Then every company or every entity which is falling into the NIS2 directive probably has to register themselves in their countries, because all the member states, they shall establish a list of essential and important entities, and they can only do this if they have an overview of the companies within their region which fall into this directive. So for example, within Germany, you need to register yourself. So the government won't check for you, but you need to register yourself. But if you fail to do so, again, there will be penalties. Talking about penalties, they can be up to 10 million euros or 2% of the worldwide annual turnover. So again, it can have a huge impact if you do not adhere to those regulations. And the timeline, so entry into force was in January 2023, and it has to be translated into national laws by the 7th of October in 2024. You already heard a lot of regulations now. So we are talking about the Cyber Resilience Act, the NIS2 directive. So let's talk about something different. Now let's talk about a standard. So the IEC 62443 for industrial communication networks, network and system security. So the IEC 62443 is a whole framework of different standards, and it's all based on security within industrial communication networks. And let's have a more detailed look at the IEC 62443-4-1 and -4-2, as those are the ones which are helping you complying with the different regulations which come with the Cyber Resilience Act or NIS2 directive or different other kinds of regulations in terms of cybersecurity. So the -4-1 outlines secure development lifecycle requirements. So you need to establish a clear cybersecurity needs for your product. You need to have a secure design, a secure implementation. You need to verify and validate all the different requirements you put into your product. You need to have defect and patch management, and also the product end of life has to be managed. So the -4-1 provides you with a set of processes and gives you a guideline of how to implement the processes you need to have in place to adhere to the most of the cyber security regulations like the CRA gives you. And the -4-2 gives you actual technical security requirements for IISC components. So it provides technical control system component requirements to ensure cybersecurity at the component level. So these requirements are associated with the 7 foundational requirements, which are set down in different IEC 62443 standard. And as you can see, we can again find our CIA, the confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability. So the -4-2 provides you with a guideline about what features need to be implemented and how they need to be implemented. So the IEC introduces different security levels, starting by security level 0 up to security level 4. And with all the different levels, so there are higher intentions, there are more resources available, the skill is rising, and also the motivation is rising. So when you want to develop your product, you need to do a risk assessment before, and during this risk assessment you also need to keep in mind against which kind of risks you want to defend your product, so or you want to secure product against. So then after this you need to decide on which security level you have to put your product in, and this will also then have an impact on the different measures you need to implement to comply to the IEC standard. Let's sum up the Cyber Resilience Act, the NIS2 directive, and the IEC 62443. The Cyber Resilience Act focuses on products with digital elements. The NIS2 directive focuses on entities, and the IEC 62443 standards, they will provide you with guidance on how to implement measures, on how to implement processes, on how to implement features to make sure you have a secure product, a secure by design product, and that you adhere to principles like defense in depth. And all this kind of guidance the IEC gives you is really helpful when complying with the Cyber Resilience Act. And maybe you look it up. There are matrices available mapping the requirements from the Cyber Resilience Act also with the requirements from the IEC 62443, and you will see that the most requirements of the CRA can already be covered by a standard like the IEC 62443. At Congatec, we simplify the use of embedded technology. But how? What is it we are actually doing? We design so-called computer on modules, and it's a quite unique concept. So here you can separate standard from customized tools, and it's a logical alternative to a full chip-down design. But why is it logical and how does it work? So you have those computer modules, which is the module here right in the middle, and it is based on open standards. So for example, COM-Express, COM-HPC, or SMARC. There are a bunch of different standards here available. They come in different sizes, different power classes, performance classes, but the important thing is they're all standardized. So they're all the same in size, and they're also standardized in the pinouts. And with this, you can then use those computer modules on your customized carrier board, where you implement all the different parts you need for your application. What are the advantages of those computer modules? So you can have faster time to market. You can reduce your development costs. So you can introduce a scalable product range by simply exchanging the modules on your standardized carrier, which is focused on your system features. So you can, for example, use a product with Intel Atom class and then scale it up to Intel Core performance, all with one design by simply exchanging the computer module. So this also gives you the chance to faster react to market trends and to minimize your inventory cost. And as it's an open standard, you can also implement the second source philosophy here. What about the positioning of the modules? So if you have a project which has really low volumes, maybe a single board computer is the deal for you. And if you have really high volumes, you can optimize your unit costs by having your own full custom design. But having a full custom design means you have high NREs for each generation, and also means that it's a really high effort to do the designs. With the single board computer, you can only do some limited customization, and you have to use the computers off the shelf. And with the computer module concept, you can combine those advantages. So you can use the off-the-shelf module, but have a customized carrier board. So you can save cost, you can greatly improve your time to market, and you can also greatly lower your efforts you have in doing the design for your application, as you can concentrate fully on your customized carrier board and then take the off-the-shelf module for it. So you need to consider those kind of applications in this medium-sized projects. And how can CONCATEC help you? So we can help you in customization for your carriers. Also the comms can be customized with customized cooling solutions. We can help you in designs with a carrier board design. We can do full custom designs as well. There will also be the possibility of modifications like special BIOSes, firmware features or settings. We can help you with integrating your system with our partner network, also including tests and certifications, and also with manufacturing like efficient, high quality production services from CONCATEC. Today's session was all about cybersecurity regulations. So let's conclude it with some security by design features from CONCATEC. So right on the top you can see cybersecurity in your application, which consists of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Then you have your own custom applications on the highest level. So on the highest layers are your applications. But below there, you need to make sure that the whole chain is secure and everything is trustworthy, and that you have a solid basis for your product. So this is the principle of defense in depth. So what can we provide you with? So our modules at the hardware level give you the possibilities to do virtualization here, or separation, which means you can run different operating systems on one piece of hardware, which are separated by our hypervisor to improve the security here. So you can have those different zones within the module to make sure that only one operating system, for example, is communicating, and the second one, for example, can be a real-time operating system which is actually running your application. So this is a really important part for the confidentiality here aspect of the security. And all of our modules come with a TPM, so you can use this for key management in your applications, for example. And for the integrity, there is a full hardware root of trust implemented, and also a secure BIOS update is possible. So where only you have your custom private key, and you use your private key to sign the BIOS updates, and to only those signed updates by you then can be applied to the module. And if you're going to use virtualization, there's also a secure bootloader for virtualization applications available. And for the availability aspect of things, so our modules are open and ruggedized designs. So they're available in extended temperature ranges. They are available with chip and memory down solutions. So you have really ruggedized modules at hand here. And the hardware is very reliable, and it's designed with a longevity of up to 10 years. So which is really important for most of the embedded applications. And then on top of this layer, with our A-Ready concept, you can get maintained operating systems and also security software on top of those different layers. And these are highly customized solutions here, which are completely focusing on your application. So there are a lot of different possibilities where we can help you by providing a secure foundation and a solid and future-proof foundation for your design. I thank you for your attention, and
all right. Well, thank you, Florian, for that really detailed and educational presentation. We've got several interesting questions in our queue, but I want to let the audience know that there's still time to submit your questions. Florian, are you ready to answer some of these questions? I don't know if I can hear you, Florian.